It was 7 a.m. when Catherine and her best friend Lucy entered the park. It was their first visit to the new park. Lucy was excited to run and work out in the new park. However, her friend Catherine was not much happy. Lucy asked her what she thought of the park, and in reply, Catherine rolled her eyes to express her annoyance. Catherine preferred working out in the park that was near her house. It saved her time, and she could also buy her favorite coffee for breakfast. Lucy giggled and told Catherine that they had come to this new park for a change. She was bored of going to the same park every day and meeting the same people. She also tried to cheer up Catherine by showing her empty benches where they could sit and enjoy their coffees. Catherine smiled at how her friend was happy coming to a new park. Unlike Catherine, Lucy loved trying out new things and visiting new places. Catherine was a person of routine. She liked to stick to the same things and routines, and even slight changes in her life made her uncomfortable, like today, when Catherine brought her to a new park. Despite huge differences in their personalities, they were inseparable since preschool. They confided in each other, and they became more like sisters than friends. Their families were also aware of their deep bond. Lucy was busy capturing pictures of the park when Catherine poked her. She asked Lucy to keep her phone away and start jogging. Lucy nodded, and she took one selfie from her phone and posted it on her Instagram account. After that, both started their morning jog. Catherine started feeling good. Morning jogs and workouts had always put her in a good mood. The park had huge and tall trees, and the sound of rustling leaves elevated Catherine's mood. She was glad that she had come to this new park with Lucy. It was less crowded and greener than the one near her house. Both of them increased their pace and started running. Their heart rates were elevated, and beads of sweat were forming on their head and trickling along their neck. Lucy stopped running and asked Catherine to do the same. Catherine thought Lucy wanted them to stop and head home. She told Lucy that she wasn't finished yet and needed 15 more minutes to complete her lap. Lucy shook her head and pointed her fingers across the track. Catherine followed the direction of Lucy's finger and saw a small stall with a board that read, "Tarot card reading." Catherine scowled at Lucy and told her that they won't do it because it's all nonsense. Lucy grabbed her hand and started dragging her towards the stall. She told Catherine it would be fun and they could post cool pictures with tarot cards on Instagram. Catherine sighed and went with Lucy to the stall on the opposite side of the jogging track. The stall owner greeted them with a big smile on his face. He asked the girls if they would like a tarot reading. Lucy nodded and said that she would love to get a reading. The man told them that it would cost them $20 each for a reading. Catherine shook her head and told Lucy that all this tarot reading was stupid and they shouldn't pay anything. The stall owner told Catherine that it was absolutely fine if she didn't want a reading, but calling tarot reading stupid was rude. Lucy apologized to the stall owner and asked him for his name. The man stared at them and said that his name was Ezekiel. He looked mysterious and wise beyond his age. But it still didn't convince Catherine to get a tarot reading. She told Lucy that she was going back to the jogging tracks. She put on her earbuds and continued running. She realized that it's been 15 minutes and Lucy wasn't back. She started running towards the tarot reading stall to find her. But to her surprise, there wasn't any stall or sight of Lucy. She thought that maybe she went a lot further from the stall. She continued running from where she and Lucy started jogging, but there was no sign of the stall or her friend. She took out her cell phone and searched for Lucy's number. It wasn't there. She thought that it must have gotten deleted somehow. She knew Lucy's number, so she dialed and waited for her to answer. But the operator said that her number was not listed. She called multiple times, and every time the response was the same. She was getting worried about her friend. She saw a middle-aged man on the bench who was reading the paper. Katrin went to him and asked him about the tarot reading stall. The man raised his eyebrows in confusion. He told Katrin that there was no such stall in this park. Katrin was agitated and told the man that his name was Ezekiel and he charged $20. The man looked at her and told her that he had been coming to the park for the last 6 years and he had never seen or heard about a tarot reader. Katrin was going crazy. She started to get worried, and thousands of thoughts of what could have happened to Lucy raided her mind. She started running towards the park's gate to see if she was waiting inside the car. But Katrin was astounded to see that Lucy's car wasn't there. She went back inside and started shouting for Lucy. She called her several times and asked her to come out from wherever she was hiding to fool her. People were staring at Katrin, and many thought that she had lost her mind. She took out her phone again and called her mom. She thought that maybe her mom knew something about Lucy's trick or prank. Her mom answered the phone, and Katrin asked her if she knew anything about Lucy's whereabouts or her prank. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Katrin restlessly repeated her question, but her mom replied that she didn't know Lucy. Kate asked Katrin if it was the same friend she met last week because she remembered her name as Laura. Katrin was clearly annoyed by what her mom was saying. She told her mom that she didn't know any Laura and was worried about finding Lucy. Her mom suggested she go to a local police station to file a missing report for a friend. Katrin called an Uber and headed for the nearest police station. In a few minutes, she was called by Inspector Pete Leahy. The inspector asked her if she had done anything to find Lucy. Katrin nodded and told him that she had tried calling her multiple times, but the operator said that her number was not registered. Pete nodded and asked Katrin to provide her friend's complete name, home address, contact number, and recent picture. Katrin told the officer that her friend's name was Lucy Walker and her address was 1785 Oak Ridge Farm Lane. She also gave him Lucy's number. The officer entered the information on his computer and asked Katrin for Lucy's picture. Katrin nodded and accessed her phone's gallery. She had plenty of pictures with Lucy. Her eyes grew wide and her heart skipped a few beats when she saw that there was no picture of Lucy on her phone. She frantically logged into Instagram to show the picture that Lucy had posted on her account in the morning. But she was baffled when she realized that there was no sign of Lucy's account on Instagram. Her heart was thudding frantically against her chest. Pete was waiting for Lucy's picture. She stammered and told Pete that she didn't have any picture of Lucy. Pete looked at her for a few seconds and told her that no such person matches Lucy's description in entire Wisconsin. He suggested Catherine go home and rest so that her brain works fine when she wakes up. Catherine couldn't believe her ears. She wanted to scream and tell the world that Lucy exists and they have been together forever. How could her mom forget Lucy? And why was the inspector saying that there was no such person in Wisconsin? She was either losing her mind or people were playing a horrible trick on her. She pressed her temples and closed her eyes. Catherine felt a lump inside her throat. Tears were at the brink of her eyes. She rolled her fist and barged out of the police station. She couldn't wrap her mind around what the officers said. No such person in Wisconsin. She knew something was definitely not adding up. She thought that something terrible had happened to Lucy, and the police were trying to cover it up. The police were involved with the criminal, so they weren't filing a missing report. All the tension made Catherine dizzy, and her mind was going numb. She couldn't think of anything except going home and talking to her mother. She pounded on her mother's door. Kate quickly came running to open the door. She looked at Catherine's face and knew something was wrong. Catherine requested her mother to bring all her photo albums. Her mother asked her to relax and have water. A few minutes later, Kate brought a huge pile of pictures and albums. Catherine grabbed the albums and started flipping the pages. Kate asked her if she was looking for a specific picture. Catherine informed her that she was looking for her pictures with Lucy. She was feeling restless and anxious about not finding one picture of her best friend. Her mother looked at her worriedly and told her that she had no such friend named Lucy. Catherine was taken aback by her mother's response. She asked her mother what was wrong with her and why she couldn't remember her childhood friend Lucy. Kate kept staring at her daughter. She was speechless. Catherine described Lucy to her mother. She also told her that Lucy was Mrs. Walker's daughter, and they had known each other since preschool. Kate hugged her daughter and told her to share all the events that had happened since the morning. Catherine mustered the courage and told her mother everything that had happened since the morning. She told her about the new park, the tarot reading stall, Ezekiel, and how Lucy and her car went missing, and how the inspector didn't file a missing report. Her mother looked extremely worried and told her that the police inspector must have been right and she was making things up. She asked her daughter to relax because her mind was under a lot of stress. Catherine was shocked by her mother's response. She felt that someone had pushed her from a high cliff into a dark abyss where nobody knew her. She ran out of the house. She kept on running until she was out of her breath. She stopped for a moment and checked the time on her watch. It was 12 p.m. She took a deep breath and decided to return to the park again. Catherine stared at the park's gate and decided to walk on the same path that she and Lucy took. She followed the same track where they jogged. She even looked across the tracks for the tarot stall. But Lucy was nowhere. She dropped herself on a bench and buried her head into her palms and started weeping. She couldn't believe there was no sign of Lucy. It was like she never existed. She didn't have her pictures or social media handles, and nobody remembered her. She composed herself and decided to go home. She stood up from the bench and turned out and started walking, when she heard someone calling her name and asking her to come to the stall. Catherine turned around in a blink She could recognize this voice. It was Lucy. She ran towards Lucy, hugged her tightly, and asked her where she had been and why she wasn't answering her cell phone. She scolded Lucy that she shouldn't have spent so much time at the stall. Katrin also told her that she had been looking for her for so many hours. Lucy looked at Katrin amusingly. She told her that it's been just 5 minutes and Ezekiel has just read one card to her. Katrin shook her head and told Lucy that she had been missing for 3 hours, and Katrin was frantically looking for her. Lucy started laughing and told Katrin to stop fooling around. She suggested Katrin ask Ezekiel if she had been with him for the last 5 minutes. Ezekiel interrupted and told Katrin that it's been 8 minutes since Lucy was gone. Both girls looked at him questioningly. Ezekiel smiled and lifted his eyebrows. He told Katrin that he knew where she was. He also told her that Lucy didn't go anywhere. Katrin stared at him. She knew that this man was right, but she didn't want to believe him. She shook her head and told Ezekiel that she was in the park searching for a friend as she couldn't find her. Ezekiel cast his devilish smile again and asked Katrin if she had been to a world where nobody knew Lucy, like she never existed. Katrin was surprised. She went pale. Ezekiel was enjoying the blood draining from Katrin's face. She asked Ezekiel how did he know what had happened to her. Lucy didn't understand what was happening. She was clearly confused and asked Katrin where she had gone. Katrin told her that she had no idea what Ezekiel was talking about. Ezekiel looked at Katrin and told her that she had crossed a portal and was transported to a parallel universe. He also informed Katrin that he knows a lot about this park, especially the electromagnetic fields present there. Katrin and Lucy stared at Ezekiel for more information. Ezekiel explained to them that there were many electromagnetic fields in the park, and when any field connected with the sun's magnetic field, it created a direct undisturbed path from our planet to other parallel universes, or time. Katrin was gawking at Ezekiel. She told Ezekiel that she hadn't time traveled as everything was the same. Ezekiel shook his head and told her that she hadn't time traveled. She was just transported to a parallel universe. He further explained that the portal Katrin had crossed only opens for 8 minutes, and then it closes for the next 8 minutes. Katrin felt like Ezekiel was telling her a story from a science fiction thriller. Ezekiel told Katrin that she was lucky she didn't cross the time portal, or else she would have been transported to the past or the future. Lucy thought that Ezekiel was joking. She told him to stop kidding, as there's no such thing as time travel. Ezekiel asked the girls if they would like proof of portals. Before the girls could answer him, they saw him running towards the 5th tree in the row. He turned around, smiled at the girls, waved them goodbye, and vanished. Katrin and Lucy gasped when Ezekiel disappeared into thin air. They couldn't believe their eyes. They grabbed each other's hands and ran out of the park. They swore never to visit that park again.